West Texas, 1879. A starving infant at a widow's door. One yes turns a quiet cabin into the fiercest home a town has ever seen. Night fell hard on the mesa. Wind carried sand like a warning. Eliza kept the lamp low, one hand on the empty cradle by the hearth. A year had passed since it held a child. Outside a coyote cried, and the sound slipped through the shutters. She checked the door bar and fed the coals a stick of mesquite. Smoke rose. Her wedding ring flashed where work had thinned it. She turned the band without thinking. A new sound rose from the wind. Not an animal. A knuckle on wood once, then again, gentle but urgent. She stilled, palm over the lamp. Eliza raised the bar and opened the door a hand's width. Cold air rushed in with dust and the iron smell of fear. A man stood in the moonlight. Tall, too thin, hair braided, shoulders wrapped in a worn blanket. Apache. His gaze went past her to the small cradle like a boat on dry ground. He held a bundle close. It moved. A thin cry rose and frayed in the wind. He spoke once in words she did not know, then tried again in halting English. "Milk," he said, voice rough. He lifted the bundle so she saw the baby's face. Narrow, mouth working, eyes sunk, skin drawn tight. "Hungry?" Eliza's hand went to her own body as if it might answer. Once she had milk enough for two. Grief ended that season, but the body remembers. Heat woke under her skin like a promise. She stepped aside and let the man in. He moved with care, reading the room. Boots, stove, water pail, the nail holding her husband's hat. His attention paused there, respectful. He knelt by the hearth and loosened the blanket. The baby's ribs counted themselves. A hawk feather lay tucked in the swaddling. Not trim, a vow. Eliza warmed her hands and lifted the child. He was light in the wrong way. Like an empty jar that should hold weight. She sat, opened her dress, and guided the tiny mouth. Pain flared, then cooled. The pull steadied and drew tears. She blinked back. The man watched, hunger and hope carving his face. The wind fell. Small sounds took over. Stove ticking, baby swallowing, cloth whispering. Eliza felt the old ache and the new pull braid into a rope she could hold. She touched the feather and set it by the lamp. He followed the motion and laid a small knife on the table, bone handle worn smooth. "Thank you," he said. "No mother now." Eliza nodded. Names could wait. She had learned plain sorrow when fever took her husband and winter took her child. She spoke with her hands. Chop wood, mend fence, hold a life near fire. Hoofbeats crossed the road below. Voices carried, harsh. Eliza lowered the lamp until the room lay in amber dusk. Outside, the talk drifted, then slid away. But the town would hear by morning. Talk could turn to hands. Hands could turn to guns. The baby's mouth slowed. She shifted him, burped him, let him nurse again, each small swallow a stitch pulling the night together. When he slept, his breath was a feather on her skin. He touched 2 fingers to his chest. "Taza," he said. He gestured to the child. "Son." He opened his palm toward her. Not a bow, not a plea. A truce was laid between them. Eliza barred the door. Down the slope, 2 lanterns bobbed like eyes. She felt the stare of men at the well. She set her husband's hat beside the knife. "Stay," she said. Simple, firm. She pulled a pallet to the hearth, folded a blanket, and set the cradle closer. Its emptiness had a job. She gave the child back to his father while she tied her work shirt. When she reached again, he hesitated, then yielded the baby. Trust, like milk, begins drop by drop. They worked in quiet. Fire tended. Water warmed. The baby woke and was fed, slept and stirred, fed again. Eliza laid the feather along the rail. The man stayed alert but softened. Near dawn, a lantern paused at her gate. Voices argued. Saw him go in. Her place, another voice spat. "Ain't right." The light bobbed closer, then held. Eliza's heart beat hard. She did not move from the cradle. The child stirred, mouth seeking. She bared her breast and offered what she had. The lantern wavered and turned away. Steps crunched on frost. Eliza watched the door until her pulse slowed. Inside, the baby slept between breaths, warmer now, heavier by an ounce of hope. She touched the feather and felt steadiness rise like fire under ash. She pictured the day, faces, whispers, a line to hold. She pulled the cradle close and laid her palm on the wood. A fragile truce, she thought. Enough to begin. Dawn thawed the frost along the fence rail. Eliza lifted the bar and opened the door to the thin morning. The baby stirred, mouth rooting in sleep. Footsteps sounded on the path, steady but watchful. The man from the night paused at the gate. In daylight, his face showed hard planes and a pale scar near his ear. Hair bound with rawhide, shoulders wrapped in a worn blanket. One palm open and empty. On his arm lay the baby, warm now. Eliza stepped aside. He glanced toward the well, toward wagon ruts, then crossed the sill. The room accepted him without noise. He set the child in the cradle as if this borrowed wood were holy. Eliza washed, dried her hands on sackcloth, lifted the baby, and guided him to nurse. He latched quickly. Color crept back into his cheeks like water returning to a creek bed. The man watched every swallow, counting by breath instead of time. Beside the hawk feather on the table lay something new. A thumb-length horse carved from cedar. The legs were rough. The neck and ears showed patience. She had not heard any carving. He must have worked in the dark, knife quiet as a moth. She touched the little horse. It smelled of wood and smoke. He gestured to it with 2 fingers. Not a boast. A promise small enough for a child's fist. When the baby slept, Eliza tucked the toy near his hand. The man stepped back, letting her arrange the blanket and rail. Trust is a path made by who moves first. From his blanket he unwrapped food. Dry meat, a twist of ground corn, 3 prickly pears scorched clean. He set them on the table and waited for a yes or no. She added beans, a heel of bread, and coffee in a tin. She set 2 cups and filled them. They ate without hurry. The meat was lean, the bread soft. He chewed like a man who remembered hunger. He poured corn into the kettle and stirred. The smell deepened, simple and good. When she reached for salt, he slid it closer, reading her before she asked. Their hands met the tin at once. Both let go. A plain courtesy, and it rang. Snow far north, he said, words chosen like stones. He touched the baby. More strong today. He is, Eliza said. She did not say because of you. She did not say because of me. A wagon rattled by. Someone coughed the way a man coughs to be known. Eliza kept washing the pot. The man stood by the window but did not part the curtain. He listened with his body. When the noise faded, the room breathed. The baby woke, rooted, and fed again. Between feedings, Eliza rinsed cloths, wiped the rail, and swept dust that would only return. Work holds fear the way a bucket holds water, heavy, useful, spillable. By mid-morning, the gate latch lifted. Miriam came up the path with a covered bowl and the walk of a woman who had chosen her side. Gray hair pinned with bone combs, mouth a line that could mean kindness or war. She saw the man and stopped. Her eyes went to cradle, breast, and feather. Her jaw moved once as if chewing. Eliza, she said. The name carried both question and shield. She set the bowl down. Steam rose, stew, fat, and thyme. You feeding him then? I am, Eliza said. Miriam looked at the child and took a breath so small it barely lifted her apron. Good, this town has enough opinions. It can spare some milk. She dipped a ladle and poured stew into a cup. She set it near the man and nodded once. Eat. He waited for Eliza to lift her cup, then tasted. Salt, meat, carrot. His guardedness shifted, not gone, but arranged. He has a name? Miriam asked. He touched his chest. Taza. Miriam nodded as if adding a word to her language. All right, Taza. She straightened. I'll tell John I brought broth for a mother and her child. That'll be true enough. Her chin tipped at Eliza. You need wood. Send for me. After she left, quiet, like clear water filled the room. Eliza felt its shape settle under her ribs. Taza stood near the door, not from fear now, but from the habit of men who know doors invite help and harm. She placed the cedar horse in the baby's palm. The fingers closed. Stay, she said, softer than before. She meant for today. She meant for as long as food and breath allowed. He answered by unrolling his blanket not by the threshold, but beside the hearth, half a pace farther in than before. Some lines you cross once, others by inches until the wind changes and the house says your name now. Light sifted through the shutters. Eliza listened for hoofbeats, for a shout from the road. Only hens clucked and the kettle ticked. The baby slept, fist around the cedar horse. She touched the cradle rail. Then the empty notch where her husband had meant to carve a name. A spring ago she had waited for the right day. Winter cut the choice short. The notch waited like a mouth that did not speak. Taza knelt by the hearth and shaved curls of kindling from a split stick. His motions were patient. The blade made a whisper, the sound of someone who had lived long by listening. Eliza folded linen cloths fresh from the line. The cold had made them stiff. She rubbed the corners to make them flex. Her hands found the same rhythm they had used for her own child. Memory rose like smoke when a log is stirred. "My boy," she said. The words were small but heavy. "He was 3 months," she swallowed. "Fever took him. Winter took my husband after." Taza set the knife flat so the blade did not point at anything living. Eliza poured slowly. "I washed the cradle every week and could not put it away." The house was quiet like a church with no voices. Today is the first day it does not feel like a lie to hear someone breathe there. Taza reached into his blanket and brought out a square of cloth around something finer. He opened it with care. The inner cloth was thin and white, edged with blue thread. Old work, handwork. Tiny beads made a row of sky. He set it on the table, not near the knife. He tapped his chest. "She made," he said. "My woman." For his first wearing. He touched the sleeping baby's hair. His face held the place where grief had decided to watch. "She died moon before?" Eliza slid the cloth toward the light. The stitches were even, strong. The blue edge looked like water when the wind moved it. She thought of her own basket of saved things. One small shirt, her husband's Sunday hat, a ribbon from a year that had rain. She had not opened that basket in months. Its shape lived in her like a closed door. "Your woman had a good hand," she said. Taza nodded. He lifted the cloth again and held it level to her. "For him," he said.
"For when you say?" Eliza understood.
"A naming cloth does not choose the name, but it keeps it the way a cup keeps water." She looked at the cradle, at the empty notch, at the hawk feather on the rail. She smoothed the cloth and felt the grit of beads. Outside, a wagon creaked. A man's laugh cut the morning thin and faded. Eliza folded her hands to stop them from shaking. "I loved my husband," she said, "and I love my child who is gone. The loving did not end because their bodies did." Her voice stayed steady. "I can love this one without stealing what belonged to them." Taza looked at her for a long time and lowered his head. He lifted the baby and placed him into her arms. He set the naming cloth over the child like a blessing that changes the air. "I watched the door," he said. He stood at the threshold, not to leave but to guard the line where the outside tries to come in. Eliza offered the breast. The child latched with a soft, sure pull. Heat spread from her chest into a place she had thought would stay snow forever. Milk drew grief into work. The baby's fingers opened and found the horse, then let it go. She brushed soot from his cheek with her thumb. "You are safe," she said. She did not add, "as long as we can manage it." At the door, Taza listened the way a pine listens, still but reading the wind. He set his hand to the bar and then to the wall as if learning the bones of the house. The old silence shifted. It was no longer the silence of absence but of a field under snow where roots still work. She watched the baby sleep and pictured the notch filled with letters. Not yet. Soon. Taza turned and met her eyes. He placed his palm over his heart and lifted it, open to her and to the child. "I keep him," he said. He touched his chest, then the cradle, then the wall near the notch. "We keep him," Eliza nodded. "We do." The fire settled. Ash softened its edge. Underneath, coals held their red like a secret. Eliza put on a stick of mesquite, and the flame rose and spoke in the language of homes that intend to stay. For good. By noon the road hummed with wheels and talk. Men from town gathered at the well, hats low, hands on belts. Eliza felt their eyes like grit on skin. She kept the door open so the light could witness whatever came. The baby slept with the cedar horse at his wrist. Taza stood a step inside, not hiding, not inviting. 3 men left the group and walked to the gate. The one in front, Parker, who sold nails and gossip, carried a rifle, not raised, not friendly. Beside him came Dent, red-faced, and a younger man Eliza did not know. They stopped at the fence as if the rails were a law. "Eliza," Parker called. "We heard you took in company." "I fed a hungry child," she said. Dent spat. "That child's Apache." "A hungry child," she said again. Parker tilted his head. "Folks are uneasy. We keep order by knowing lines. Cross the wrong one and you get fire." Taza did not move. His gaze weighed the men, then the road behind them. His hand rested near the knife on the table, but he did not touch it. Eliza set her palm on the cradle rail. "If you came to speak, speak." "We came to take him out," Dent said. "Send the buck along." "He belongs where he is fed and guarded," Eliza said. "Today that is here." The young man's mouth twitched, uncertain. Parker kept his smile. Behind him, more men drifted closer. Metallic clicks carried. Someone checking a chamber, someone else pretending he hadn't. Eliza lifted the baby. He stirred, searching. She untied her dress with careful hands. She sat on the stool in the open doorway where every eye could see and brought the child to her breast. The world narrowed to latch, swallow, breath. Silence cut the yard. Dent swore and looked away. The young one blushed. Parker's mouth thinned. "Indecent," he said. "Indecent is letting a child starve," Eliza said. "You brought rifles to my fence. I brought breakfast to his mouth." Taza set the cedar horse on the threshold, a small figure keeping watch. Up the road came the clack of a spoon in a tin. Miriam stepped into view, basket on one arm, ladle in the other. She walked through the gate past Parker as if he were a post and stopped beside Eliza. "Well then," she said, lifting the lid so steam rose. "I brought stew for a mother feeding her child and coffee for any man who might be mistaking hunger for anger." A few men laughed. The sound cracked something brittle. Miriam poured coffee into cups and handed them like communion. Parker did not take a cup, Dent did. The young one did, hands clumsy. "Seems to me," Miriam said, "that a town that talks decency ought to remember where decency starts. We don't starve babies and we don't scare widows." She tipped her chin toward Taza. "And we don't break truces kept till morning." Parker's eyes flicked to the other faces. He measured and found less count than he wanted. He set the rifle higher on his shoulder. "No one wants trouble," he said. "We'll be back with the marshal to sort this legal." "You do that," Miriam said. "Bring scripture while you're at it." Dent muttered and turned away. The young man looked at the baby again. "He's small," he said, and followed Dent. The men drifted back toward town. Parker lingered one heartbeat longer, tipped his hat, and went. When they were gone, the yard breathed. The baby finished, sighed, and slept heavy with the right weight. Eliza covered herself and kissed his temple. Miriam set the basket on the table and leaned both palms on the wood. "First stand is the hardest and easiest," she said. "Hard because you feel the whole town in your bones. Easy because the truth is simple." "Thank you," Eliza said. Miriam waved it off and looked to Taza. "You'll want the marshal to hear this from us before Parker adds polish. I'll fetch Reverend Hale. Law sounds louder when a caller repeats it." Taza touched his chest, then drew 2 fingers from his lips and outward. A thank you shaped like breath. After she left, Eliza watched the dust settle where feet had cast their votes. She imagined rain washing it clean. Not yet, soon. Taza set the cedar horse back by the baby's hand. He smoothed the naming cloth and said, "Strong." "We held," Eliza said. "We hold," he answered. She barred the door, not to shut out the day, but to keep in what they had claimed. The house felt small, like a fist that protects more than it strikes. Outside, the well creaked and fell quiet. Inside, the baby breathed and the stew cooled. Work waited, steady as a heartbeat. Night came without a moon. Wind stilled as if the land held breath. Eliza trimmed the lamp low and checked the bar on the door. The baby slept warm on the naming cloth. The cedar horse kept its small watch. Taza moved quietly, testing the hinge and latch, setting a cord from peg to bar so any lift would hum. He slid a bucket near the sill where a boot might knock it. He wrapped one forearm with his blanket. Not fear, readiness. Eliza felt fear anyway, a wire under the skin. She drew the cradle closer to the hearth and listened to the stove tick. From the road came many voices. Boots, metal, a lantern swing across her wall. Taza touched 2 fingers to his lips, then to the floor. Breathe where you stand. A flat knock hit the door. The cord sang. Open up, a rough voice called. He comes out, the baby goes to folks that belong. We are here, Eliza said, voice steady. Say what you want without breaking wood. Town rules, the voice said. Stand aside. No, Taza answered. His shadow reached the threshold. The bar jumped. Someone shouldered the plank. The bucket clanged, laughter followed, then another hard hit. Nails cried. The door opened a hand's width and a boot toe pressed. Don't break my door, Eliza said. I will feed him. That is all. A rifle barrel slid through the gap. Taza knocked it up with his wrapped arm. The shot cracked the lintel and filled the room with grit and ringing. The baby woke and cried. Eliza lifted him, bared her breast, and the child latched, hungry and needing comfort both. If you must look, look, she said over the ringing. But you will not take food from a child's mouth. Stand back, the rough voice ordered. The door shoved again. Taza braced the plank with his shoulder and shoved back. He seized the barrel as it pushed and twisted. The man outside cursed and let go. Metal slid inside. Taza snapped the stock against the jamb and tossed the pieces out. Growls answered. A second barrel was probed. Taza jabbed the poker through the gap and wrapped knuckles and shins, hard enough to sting, not to break. Cries rose, swearing, then a ripple of mean laughter. Enough, Eliza said, not loud, not pleading. She sat in the doorway's light with the baby at her breast, milk pale against the dark. If you are men, be men. See a child fed, then go home. The push faltered. In the pause, Parker's cool voice carried, Hold. He came forward with a lantern, eyes counting splinters and the wrapped arm. Foolish, he said. Back up. The eager ones shifted. Parker peered through the gap. Say your claim, he told Taza, clerk cold. Taza drew a breath and let it out slowly. He touched his chest. She is his mother, he said. He touched the baby's back, then his own heart. I am his father. The words filled the room like water filling a bowl. Not loud, but complete. You hear a claim, Eliza said into the stillness. Law older than fences. You will not break this door tonight. Parker lowered the lantern a fraction. Marshall rides at first light. Then come at first light, Eliza answered. Tonight we keep peace. Parker weighed the faces behind him. Boots began to turn. The lantern swung away. Dust settled. The cord went quiet. Taza held the door until the last step faded. He set his forehead to the wood a moment, something like prayer. Eliza breathed. The baby's jaw slowed. She lifted him to her shoulder and waited for the small burp that felt like a promise. He retied the cord and reset the bucket. She laid the baby in the cradle and set the cedar horse at watch. Outside, night took back the yard. Inside, the line was drawn and would hold till morning. Eliza stayed seated, listening for Boots. Only a coyote called from the draw, a thin sound fading like smoke. Powder hung near the door. She cracked the flue and let it lift. Her hands shook once, then steadied on the cradle rail. Taza wet a rag and wiped the lintel. He pressed the split with his thumb. Holds, he said. It will hold, Eliza answered. She smoothed the blue-edged cloth and tucked it beneath the baby's cheek. She banked the fire and set a stick of mesquite. Heat rose and evened her breath. At the window, frost silvered the rail. Dawn would bring the marshal. She did not know his mind. She knew hers. Feed the child, keep the truce, speak truth. Taza unwrapped his arm and flexed his fingers. He sat by the threshold, palm over heart, quiet, sure. Eliza lay with her hand on the rail and slept between breaths. Morning rose clean and cold. Frost made lace on the roof. Eliza opened the door and let light fall across the boards. The night had passed without more boots. Taza slept sitting up by the threshold, head tilted, the wrapped forearm on his knee. The bar still held. The cord he tied hung quietly between pegs. Eliza touched it and felt a faint hum. The baby woke hungry and certain. Eliza fed him in the warm patch by the hearth. His cheeks had more color. His eyes tracked the light and then her mouth. Taza stood and rolled his shoulders. Bruise shadowed the arm he had used to knock the rifle. Eliza fetched water, willow bark, and a strip of cloth. He sat with patience. She worked the cloth in the water until it cooled the heat in his skin. "You did not break their bones," she said. He shook his head. "Not broken," he answered. "Hold." "You held," she said. "I will hold now." She bound the compress snugly and slid the knot where it would not bite. He tested the wrap and nodded. The cedar horse lay on the table. Taza scraped the leg smoother and handed it to the baby. Tiny fingers closed and let go. They ate corn porridge with beans and coffee. Miriam's stew warmed again. After breakfast, Taza stood beneath the main beam. He touched the empty place where years ago Eliza's husband had meant to cut a family mark. His face asked a question without words. "Here," she said. "If it is to be, let it be here." She lifted the baby toward the beam the way a mother presents a child to light. Taza set the point of his knife and began to carve. Not letters first. A sign. 3 short cuts that met like a small mountain with water under it. Then with patient strokes he shaped letters. Eliza guided the order softly. The name settled into the wood. When he finished, he stepped back. Eliza traced the grooves. The cuts were clean and deep. She felt steadier having a word she could point at when the world asked questions. She kissed the baby's hair. "Welcome," she said. Taza reached into his pouch and drew out a small loop of corn kernels strung on horsehair. Each kernel was pierced neatly through the soft end. He held it in his palm, a circle the size of a coin. "My mother," he said, "makes for first naming. Corn for feed, circle for keep." He looked to Eliza. "Blessing." Eliza lifted the child so the loop lay against his chest. She tied it loose enough to rest but not tug. The corn smelled faintly sweet, summer held in winter. "Grow," she whispered. "Be fed. Be kept." Taza touched the loop and then his forehead. Wheels sounded on the road. Voices came, not angry now. Reverend Hale and the U.S. Marshal rode side by side. Miriam walked before them. Parker trailed. Eliza set the baby in the cradle and opened the door wide. Taza stood beside her, not behind. The men reined at the gate. Reverend Hale lifted a hand. "Morning, Mrs. Garrett." His voice held prayer and caution. "We heard there was trouble." "We've come for the truth." The marshal nodded. "We'll hear both sides," he said. A hungry infant came to a doorstep. A widow fed him. Some men forgot their mothers. "That's one side." She pointed at the splintered lintel. "Here's the rest." Parker cleared his throat. "Town safety," he said. "We can't have law bent by feeding a baby?" Miriam snapped. "Say that to the Lord." The marshal dismounted and stepped to the threshold. He took in the feather on the rail, the naming cloth, the carved beam, and the loop of corn. "Looks like a family claim," he said. "No crime here I can see." Reverend Hale looked at Eliza. "Do you intend to keep this child as your own?" Eliza's answer rose clean. "I do. He called me mother." I answered. Taza placed his palm to his chest. "I am father," he said. The marshal tipped his hat. "Then until a court says otherwise, I'll protect this household as a household." He looked at Parker. "Keep your men off this porch." Parker swallowed. "We meant order." "Then keep it," the marshal said. The small crowd thinned. Miriam stayed. "You have friends," she said. "And you have a name in the beam. That matters." After they left, the house felt taller. Eliza looked up at the letters. She touched Taza's wrapped arm. "Thank you," she said. He answered without words. Eliza held the baby so that he could see his name. He waved his fist and the corn loop clicked like a tiny bell. But inside, love had chosen a place to live and had written itself into wood. The sky cleared after noon. Heat shone on the creek stones. Eliza washed clothes at the bend where cottonwoods gave shade. The baby rode in a sling against her chest, his breath warm. Upstream, Taza moved along the bank, reading the ground. They chose this hour because the road slept. Still, Eliza felt watched. Birds were quiet. The water sounded too loud. Taza raised a palm. He bent over a tangle of reeds. A fresh boot track cut the mud above the waterline. A cattail lay snapped. He pointed to a low patch where brush hid the bank's approach. Eliza wrung out the last cloth. "We can go," she said. He shook his head. "Better on open," he answered. They sat here. "We choose the ground." They walked to the wide gravel bar where the creek curved. Sun made a hard circle there. Brush could not creep close. Eliza shifted the sling so the baby's ear rested over her heart. She set the bucket by her skirt and stood. Men rose from the brush like thorns pulled from cloth. Parker stepped first. Dent stood behind. Two more lifted scarves. Rifles showed. The creek made a bright line between. "Afternoon," Parker said. Marshall rode east. "Funny time to stroll." "We came for water," Eliza said. "Water you shall have." "Then we take what belongs," Dent said. "No court needed. Town business." Taza slid one step so he stood between them and Eliza. "Give over the child," Parker said. "Keep your kindness in your house. Let the wild go with the wild." Eliza felt the baby stir. She laid her palm over the corn loop and steadied her breath. "He stays with his mother," she said. "His father stands here." Dent lifted his rifle. "I'll settle it quick." Taza raised both hands open. He pointed with his chin to Parker's men. "Many eyes," he said. "Law hears." "Law rode out," Parker said. But his pupils sharpened. Hoofbeats answered from the road above the trees. Reverend Hale's horse slid down the path. Behind him rode the marshal, coat pinned back. Miriam came on foot. "Hold," the marshal called. He took in rifles, brush, the bar, and the sling at Eliza's chest. "This smells like an ambush." Parker kept his smile thin. "Just persuasion." "Looks like an attempted child seizure," the marshal said. "And violation of a household under my protection." "Set the guns down." Dent half laughed. "Your badge is small out here." The marshal stepped onto the bar. "Try me," he said. Miriam stood beside Eliza and turned her so the sling showed plain. "You all see," she said. "Mother feeding her child." Reverend Hale said, "Parker, a hand that steals a child has no scripture to hide behind." Parker measured the count and found the sum had changed. His rifle lowered. "We came too hot," he said. "We'll take it to talk." "You'll take it to court if you take it anywhere," the marshal said. He whistled. Two deputies eased from the trees, rifles ready. "Hands where I can see them." Dent set that piece on the stone. Dent swore but obeyed. The marshal turned to Eliza. "Ma'am, you're under federal protection until a judge says different. Anyone pressing you presses me." Eliza let out the breath trapped under her ribs. She looked at Taza. His hands uncurled. The baby, woken by voices, rooted. She loosened her shawl and fed him. Parker tried to save his face. "You set us against soldiers with this," he told the marshal. "I set you against the law if you trespass on it," the marshal replied. They walked. Miriam watched them go. Reverend Hale bowed his head. "Grace over foolishness," he said. "Grace over this house." On the bar, Eliza dipped a cloth and wiped soot from Taza's sleeve. She put the cedar horse in the baby's hand. "Home is not a roof," she said. "It is a line we keep." Taza touched the feather in the sling. "We keep," he said. They crossed the shallows. The sun warmed their ankles. Cottonwoods let the light tatter through. By the lane, the sound of hooves went thin. The house waited, door open, beam carved. On the table, the naming cloth lifted once. The marshal followed to the porch. He tipped his hat. "I'll put it in writing," he said. "If anyone comes again, point to my words as well as your own." "We will," Eliza said. He looked at the baby. then at the cut letters. "Grow straight," he said, and mounted. Quiet returned. Eliza held the baby until he slept and laid him down. A hawk rode a circle. She breathed. The fear that held morning loosened a knot. Work would come. Talk would rise. But the law had set its hand beside theirs. They had chosen ground, and ground had answered. Spring came again to Lone Mesa. Snow melted into the arroyo and left the earth smelling like iron and flowers. Eliza turned soil in a narrow garden behind the cabin. The fence held beans and small roses Miriam had rooted in jars. The baby was not a baby now. He toddled with careful joy, the cedar horse gripped by the ear, the corn loop tied to a ribbon. Taza repaired the porch rail. He set new pegs where winter had loosened them. When he stretched, the scar on his forearm showed pale and quiet. The door stood open. Sun reached the carved beam and warmed the letters. The town had not turned sweet, but it had learned to quit staring. The marshal's paper hung in the church entry, neat under glass. Men read it, coughed, and talked of the weather. Reverend Hale visited and carried a bucket. Miriam came with eggs and once with seeds wrapped in a hymn page. Eliza taught letters at the schoolhouse on Saturdays. Children sat at long benches, settlers' daughters, 2 cowboys' sons, a quiet girl from the far wash. Taza fixed the hinge and painted the sill with milk and lime. He sat at the back and carved a slate edge smooth, watching without hovering. The children learned the shapes of their names. Eliza said, "Names are a way we hold one another." On Sundays they stood near the back of the church. Some faces turned. Some did not. Eliza sang the low parts and kept the child near. In the evenings, Taza taught the boy to step softly, to see a small sign in the dust. Eliza taught him to wash the spoon, to pat the dog, to touch roses with one finger. Summer set the mesa bright and hard. The child learned yes and no and then please. He called Eliza Ma and Taza Da, and sometimes put his hands on both their faces at once. One day after the last hoeing, Taza stood with his hand on the beam. He had carved small marks to measure the boy's height. He looked at the empty wood below the name and then at Eliza. He touched his chest, then shaped words slowly. "You and I." She wiped dirt from her palms. They had lived the answer for months, but saying it mattered. He reached into his pouch and brought out a band of braided horsehair, dark and strong. In the braid were 3 corn beads, pale as moons. Eliza felt breath leave and return. She thought of winter and how the hearth had gone from ash to flame, and of this man stepping first across her threshold and then a little more each day. She took the band and turned it on. Miriam arrived at the gate as if the wind had carried her. She looked once and laughed, soft and glad. "About time," she said. She had a small parcel. Inside lay a ring of simple silver from John's old tack, shaped at the smith's. "If you want it," she said. Eliza took the ring. It was clean, honest, and plain. She looked at Taza. He watched her, not pressing her answer toward any shape. "Yes," she said. They did not wait a season. A week later, in the yard where beans climbed and roses opened, they stood with the child between them. Reverend Hale read vows. Beside him stood an elder from Taza's people who had come with traders. The elder blessed water from the creek and touched a damp palm to the child's brow, then to Eliza's, then to Taza's. He set a pinch of ground corn in the air and let it fall like small stars. Eliza slid the silver ring onto Taza's finger. Taza tied the braided band around Eliza's wrist. The child laughed because the corn dust tickled his nose. Miriam cried and said she had only dust in her eye. After, they ate stew and fried bread and beans. People came and went, some shy, some loud. The marshal put a hand on Taza's shoulder and said, "Glad to write this in the book." The school children brought wildflowers and forgot to be solemn. At dusk, when the last plates were clean, Taza took up the knife. Eliza lifted the boy so he could see. Together they cut new letters into the beam. Eliza's name, then Taza's, side by side with the child's between. The wood took the marks and made them plain. They set the cedar horse on the sill as a witness. A wind moved over the mesa and shook the roses. The hawk drew a slow circle and slid west. Eliza leaned her head against Taza's shoulder. The child pressed his palms to the new cuts and said his word for together. Their house held it and kept it. Late summer laid gold on the fields. The garden climbed higher than the fence posts, beans curling like friendly hands. The roses held tight red hearts and then broke them open. Smoke from the stove lifted straight, a blue line that said peace. The child, walking sure now, saying many words, carried the cedar horse in one fist and a twig flag in the other. He liked the porch steps best. Up, down. Each landing earned a laugh he saved for both parents. Taza mended the school roof with John's ladder while Eliza chalked letters for Saturday. Children's voices bounced like pebbles in a tin. The shy girl from the far wash read her name and smiled. Taza carved a new slate frame and left it by the window with a sun cut into the corner. In town, Parker kept his chin high, but his eyes were careful. He still did not stop at their gate. He bought nails from his own shop and talked too long about the weather. When the marshal passed, Parker found the other side of the street. Pride can be a rope that looks like a rail. Miriam told stories in the schoolyard while shelling peas. She made the children laugh and then work. She said laughter is easier when hands move. Eliza agreed and handed out spellers. The pages went soft with use. On the ridge above the creek, Eliza brought the child to the stones that held her husband's name. She cleaned the marker with water from a jar. The child touched the carved letters with 2 fingers, respectful without knowing why. Taza stood back, hat in hand. Eliza told the grave about the garden, the school, and the beam. Wind answered with a dry grass sound like yes. They made a habit of mercy. Taza left meat at the edge of the widow's yard and did not knock. Someone returned the borrowed saw and left a sack of flour in trade. Reverend Hale stopped gossip by quoting the words that won't bend. Care for widows, care for children, love your neighbor. He did not need to add because, on a hot evening, the town gathered for a barn raising at the north end. Taza lifted beams. Eliza hauled pegs. The child slept on a quilt in the shade. When the roof went on, people clapped. John clapped Taza's shoulder hard. Even Dent muttered something that could be thanks and did not look like a man chewing nails. That night, music rose from a fiddle, thin and happy. Lanterns made pockets of noon. Eliza danced once with Taza, slow, careful of old eyes but not ruled by them. Her skirt brushed dust and set it shining. The child woke, saw them, and clapped. Miriam took him and spun once until he squealed. A boy from the far ranch offered Taza a tin cup. Taza took it and drank and said thank you, in a voice he had shaped to this language. Later, moonlight silvered the porch. Crickets wrote their soft line. Eliza set a bowl of warm water on the step and washed the day from the child's feet. Taza sat beside them and oiled the cedar horse, rubbing patience into the wood until it gleamed. The beam above them watched with its 3 names and the marks that kept time. In the fall, Eliza opened the school 3 days a week. Taza made benches from cottonwood and fixed a shutter that liked to argue with the wind. The child brought corn from the garden and put 3 kernels on the teacher's desk for luck. Eliza kept them in a cup by the bell. When the children grew too noisy, she rang the bell and they laughed and settled as if order could be kind. Once a letter came, dusty from miles. It was from a woman east of the river who had heard there was a place where a mother fed a child first and argued second. She asked if her sister might come to teach sewing. Eliza read the lines twice and smiled. Yes, she wrote back. Come. As the air thinned with the year, a hawk circled low over the yard and dropped a feather. It landed by the porch rail as if placed. The child reached it first and held it to the light. The feather's edge glowed pale and warm. Eliza set it above the door near the old one. Taza nodded. Some gifts arrived without footsteps. They slept more easily, still alert to wind and hoofbeats but not clenched like before. The house creaked the way honest houses do. The stove ticked. The beam held. The names did not fade. Belonging had not asked for trumpets. It had come like water in furrows, plain and steady, and the ground accepted it. Dawn came softly. blessing the house more than waking it. The stove held a red sleep under ash. Eliza fed it one stick of mesquite and listened. Sparrow in the eaves, kettle ticking, the child murmuring in his dream. Taza stepped outside, palm on the porch rail he had pegged last spring. No looseness. Sky clean. He came in and kissed Eliza's brow without words. Gently. Habit can be a prayer. The child woke with hair like grass after rain. Horse, he said, and bread together. Eliza stirred the porridge. Taza set the cedar horse in the small fist. Hooves tapped the table edge until Eliza put bowls down. They ate while light crossed the floorboards. 3 names watched from the beam. The newest height mark made the child laugh at himself. Outside, roses threw a late bloom, softer than spring. Eliza pinched one spent flower and let the others open on their own time. The air smelled of earth and soap and wood smoke, the plain perfume of a kept life. Taza drew water. The rope purred. He showed the child how to lift the handle with 2 hands. The child splashed his boots and crowed. Small work makes small pride. Small pride builds men. Miriam came over the rise with a basket. 2 loaves, she said, and a letter. The sewing woman arrives when the moon is slim. Eliza thanked her. Miriam glanced at the roses and then at the beam. Look how far, she said. Eliza squeezed her hand. Some sums you do by touch. Reverend Hale rode past later. Peace to this door, he called, not stopping. In town, the marshal had written once more beside their names. Household recognized. Clouds rose in the west and pulled a slow shade. Eliza shelled beans under the porch while the child lined pebbles. Taza mended a strap. A hawk crossed low and dropped a feather that fell without hurry. The child set it above the door near the old one, careful as a reader laying down a learned line. Eliza opened a small basket she had not touched in months. The shirt from her first child, a ribbon, a page of music her husband had kept. She did not cry. She smoothed the cloth and felt the ache soften like wax near flame. She stood by the beam and whispered toward the ridge. We remember you and we go on. The words did not take from the past. They laid a path through it. Neighbors drifted by with ordinary needs. John borrowed an auger. A cowhand returned a book and left honey. A note from the east sent patterns for small shirts, for quick growing. Eliza pinned them where the light liked to rest. Taza sliced the last sweet corn into the stew. The house filled with a clean smell. They ate on the step while the sky turned peach, then copper, then blue-gray. The child slept before the last spoonful, head heavy on Eliza's arm. Taza carried him in. Eliza laid him on the naming cloth, set the cedar horse in the crook of his elbow, and checked the corn loop's soft circle. The beam, cut deep, held steady. Ash pulsed in the stove. Eliza and Taza sat shoulder to shoulder and let the day be enough. They did not speak much. He touched the new mark. She watched the ember breathe and thought of the nights when breath had felt borrowed. Now it felt owned. Wind moved through the roses and set them nodding. The feather above the door shifted and settled. A coyote called far off, more signature than threat. They listened to the house be a house. Before sleep, Eliza took a small knife and cut a shallow notch in the porch rail where dawn first lands. For remembering, she said, when storms come again, and they will, we will see where the light returns. Taza looked and nodded. He knows the wisdom of marks. Letters in beams, scratches on rails, promises shaped into wood you can touch on dark mornings. They banked the fire and set the bar, not from fear but from custom. The wood dropped into place with a sound that carried old nights and new peace in the same note. Eliza blew the lamp until only ember light held the room. She looked once more at the child, the feather, the names, and felt the shape of tomorrow rise in her like bread. Outside, the mesa lay quiet. Stars stitched their plain pattern. Inside, the 3 of them slept near, steady as the breath of coals. The last thing Eliza heard was Taza's hand rasp once on the cradle rail, and the smallest sigh from the child. A sound that said yes to all that had led them here, and yes to all that would come. Thanks for listening. If stories of hope and Western love speak to you, tap like so more folks find this. Subscribe and hit the bell for the next frontier romance. What moment moved you most, Eliza's first stand or the creek rescue? Tell me in the comments. And if you want another tender, faith-tinged tale, watch the next story on your screen now.